Hey there, this is Steve Lee with Veritas Catholic Network. Today on Let Me Be Frank, Bishop Caggiano talks to Sean Callahan, the President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. So keep your radio dialed to 1350 AM for today's show, and keep it dialed in throughout the week. If you're tired of listening to noise on the radio, now you have a place to be fed. So keep 1350 Veritas Catholic Network on your dial, or download the Veritas Catholic Network app on your phone. Either way, you can listen to uplifting conversations, learn more about the faith, participate in spiritual devotions, all of this on the app. You can also get podcasts of our shows. We are Catholic Radio for Connecticut and New York. Take us with you wherever you go. The app is available on the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, or you can visit www.veritascatholic.com. Hey there, this is Steve Lee with Veritas Catholic Network. Let me begin, as always, by welcoming you to Let Me Be Frank, featuring the great Bishop Frank Caggiano.
Steve, it's always good to be with you, and today we have a great guest.
Yes, definitely. Our special guest on this week's episode of Let Me Be Frank, Sean Callahan. He's the President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services, the official international humanitarian agency of the Catholic community in the United States. Sean is a 31-year agency veteran who has held a wide variety of leadership roles overseas and at agency headquarters in Baltimore. Welcome to the show, Sean. I know you and Bishop Caggiano already know each other very well.
Yes, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Bishop.
Yeah, Sean, welcome. I have the great privilege of working with Sean. Just about a year and a half ago, I was given the great honor of serving on the board of CRS as its chair, and I must tell you, I have been extraordinarily impressed, Sean, with your vision, your leadership, and the fact that you see your entire ministry as a ministry, right, at CRS. So part of what I would like to do is give you an opportunity to, besides welcoming you, is to give to our listeners who may not know CRS, that may not know the ins and outs, just give us like the general sense of what is CRS and what does it do. Let's start with that.
Terrific. Well, the vision of CRS is really solidarity between the U.S. Catholic Church and the Catholic Church around the world. And CRS's mission is really to save, protect, and transform lives. And the way we do that, quite frankly, is through access and opportunity. Our teams are on the ground around the world working with local church and civil society actors, as well now more and more governments. And we're providing the opportunity for people to have access to resources or technical skills so that they can respond to their daily needs and to the crises that they face in many of these countries.
Mm-hmm. And I think most of our listeners perhaps do not appreciate how large an operation CRS is. Perhaps you could speak to that?
Sure. CRS works in over 100 countries around the world, and we have close to 7,000 staff. And we have offices in many of these countries, so we have colleagues who are in those offices reaching out and responding to such things as earthquakes and tsunamis and things like that on the emergency front, assisting and responding to emergencies such as wars and violent conflicts that occur, or hunger issues. And quite, in today's day and age, the pandemic is obviously a big issue.
Oh, without a doubt. And what impresses me, well, many things impress me about CRS, but one of the things that's very, in my perspective, really is heart moving, is really brings home the mission, is when we have the opportunity to hear stories on the local level of how CRS transforms lives. And I know this year in the Rice Bowl collection, we've highlighted a few places around the world. So can you share with our listeners and remind me as well some of the local initiatives that are going on in different parts of the world, so we can give some, like, say, a flesh to the bones of what we're talking about?
Certainly. Right now, as we face the pandemic around the world, one of the key things that we're facing is what we call shadow pandemic. So in many of the places in which we work, there's a hunger crisis because unlike many of us who can go to a grocery store and work online, we've got people who are what we call daily wage earners. So they have to go out and earn a living, every day. And so one of the key things right now is we have teams on the ground that are helping support people with food insecurity in places like Ethiopia. There's currently a violent conflict in the north in a province called Tigray. And in that region, we have just been asked to increase our caseload. We were going to be assisting 2.5 million people there with our church partners, the church in Tigray and Mekki and Addis Ababa and many of the different areas throughout Ethiopia. And we've just been asked to up that to 3.85, close to 4 million people now are in dire need of food resources. And so on a daily basis, our teams are going out there negotiating with security people in various areas and trying to bridge the gap between that humanitarian response and just keeping our staff safe.
Hmm. And I think a lot of our listeners would also perhaps don't realize, but when CRS goes into a country or an area, it really does in collaboration with invitation by the bishops of that area. Is that not the case?
It is the case, and actually, I began my career in Nicaragua during the wartime there, and right after I arrived in Nicaragua, it was hit in 1988, so over 30 years ago. It was hit by a hurricane called Hurricane Juana, and I went out there with a Capuchin bishop who's actually was the bishop of the Vicariate of Bluefields, the Vicariate of Bluefields out on the Atlantic coast. And we worked together, and I was really taken by, I joined this big room of young men, and I found out that they were all priests. They were, in dirty shirts and things because they were helping people to rebuild their homes. And there was a mix of the American missionaries with the local Nicaraguans. And just that unity together was really, a heartfelt collaboration and solidarity of the U.S. church with the overseas church. And then in today's day and age, I mentioned Ethiopia, and then we also have, there's a conflict in Myanmar, and we've been back and forth with our local church partners trying to figure out how best to respond. And they have appreciated our closeness and our collaboration. And so they provide information to us so that we can respond a little bit better, both in our advocacy efforts as well as our direct interventions in those countries. So as a Catholic Relief Services, we only go into countries where we're invited in by the local church. So we are there at the invitation of the local church and work quite closely with them. And in places where the church is a minority, such as in some of the Sahel countries in Africa, like Niger, we work closely with the two bishops, but we also spread that out and spread the goodness and the compassion of the Catholic Church with the bishops that are there and the small number of Catholics, less than 5,000, to the local population so they can see that the Catholic Church is there for all people, that universality of Catholicism.
Mm-hmm. And so CRS really is an act of solidarity. It is as you said at the very beginning, it's a ministry of solidarity of the larger church joining forces to aid a particular part of the church that happens to be in need, whether it's through natural catastrophe or war, or just the need to help sustain development, right, for the citizens of the area. So I think many people don't realize it's an ecclesial reality, CRS, in that sense, right? It's true solidarity, as the church has always wanted its members to understand. We are all in this together, right, as one church.
Exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
the Holy Father has asked us to reach out, and to be out there in those, that field hospital out with the people. And so here we are as the American church side by side with the local church. And the thing that I love most about CRS is when I go out there and I'm with the bishop and he says to me, I can't tell the difference between your staff and my staff. And I reach my hand over and say, thank you, Bishop. That's the best compliment I've had all day.
Hmm. That's tremendous. So tell us, when did CRS start? How did it start?
So CRS was a response to World War II. The military was responding to the needs after World War II, and they decided that those who were fighting in the war might not be the best to provide relief and assistance, particularly to refugees. So CRS jumped in and started providing assistance to refugees and helping them relocate from their war-torn countries, and many people who didn't feel the security to go back to their countries. So we actually started by assisting some of the Polish refugees who had migrated to Russia, and we resettled them in Mexico because at that point, even after the war, the U.S. was concerned about additional migrants coming into the country. So we ended up starting out by settling Polish refugees in Mexico. And it was interesting. We're now about 77 years old. We were starting in 1943. And I went with one of those former refugees. He was a young boy at the time, 4 years old. And he came over. His father died in the Gulag in Russia at that time. And he came over to Mexico. And we visited a couple of years back the place in Mexico. And as I was introducing him to the bishop there in Mexico, when we were doing the visit, I introduced him in Spanish, and then the Mexican bishop actually started speaking Polish to him to really show the universality of the church. Wow. And he just broke down in tears to see that. And this gentleman now has migrated from Mexico. He came to the United States. He served in our military. He's an active member of the church, and he's now a CRS supporter. And so he just wanted people to know that this is the history of this organization and how, when we work together, we really can, save and transform the lives of people.
What a great insight for all of us to remember that at the beginning, CRS had a European focus, right, coming out of the war. And now, as Europe has recovered all of these almost 8 decades, our focus shifts where there is other need, but it's a global mission, right? And 70 years from now, when we are all gone, who knows what the focus, where CRS will be. The fact that there will be a CRS, I have no doubt. But where the focus is, only the Holy Spirit will reveal that in time. The church goes where there is need in the end, right?
Exactly.
So you've been over 30 years at CRS.
I have been. And Bishop, just to talk on that global mission, I would just like to jump in there and say, although
Please.
We're not as active in Europe as we have been in the past, and a lot of our focus is now more on Africa, and some efforts in Latin America and the Middle East, where the Holy Father, landed today in Iraq and places like that. We have gone back into Europe, and during the refugee crisis, we were assisting in the Balkans and assisting populations who were traversing through. When Ukraine was attacked by Russia, we went in there to support Caritas Ukraine, and we have an office in Greece right now because of refugees coming out of Iraq and Syria. And so, although our genesis was helping in Europe, we partner with the Europeans and continue that relationship. But the relationship with some of our partners in Africa, Asia, and Latin America has grown even larger than it was, years ago.
Right. And just to state the obvious, there are initiatives underway which are very delicate, given the situations that CRS finds itself in. Oftentimes, CRS is the first to be called in the very situations that you are referring to, that we could not really speak to great detail without compromising the security of the individuals involved. So everything we speak of, our listeners should understand there is much more at work that perhaps we can't explain in any great detail. Is that a fair statement, Sean?
It is, and it's unfortunate, but in order to protect the local church, in order to protect our teams on the ground, we often do things very quietly and through back channels, and don't make a lot of declarative statements. We certainly promote the justice and the teachings of the church wherever we go, and we're in solidarity with that local church. But sometimes that might mean that we have to do that quietly and not on the public realm, so that we can actually make that difference on the ground and save and protect those lives.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So tell me, some of the more exotic places you have visited in your career at CRS, what would you consider to be the more interesting? I call it exotic, but perhaps not the right word. Interesting, thought-provoking, memorable. Give us some vignettes, some personal stories, Sean.
Yeah, I would probably have to say, and my wife would probably kill me if I didn't mention it, but I had worked in Latin America, and then I was in Africa, and when I was in Sierra Leone in Africa during a wartime, I got a call from our headquarters, and they said, "How about Calcutta?" And I thought, Calcutta, wow, I didn't know anything about Calcutta. I thought, I said, all I can tell you about Calcutta is Mother Teresa and the black hole of Calcutta. And they said, well, that's why we'd like you to go there. We want you to work with Mother Teresa. So, lo and behold, I was on a plane and I went to Calcutta, and then I, was blessed to have the opportunity to work with Mother Teresa and the Missionaries of Charity, and just seeing that mission on the ground firsthand. Every weekend I would spend going to a new center of the Missionaries of Charity so I could really understand their charism and on how they worked. And just visiting with Mother Teresa and seeing the joy that she and the sisters had. There was one experience I had where I worked in the Center for the Dying in a place called Kalighat. And it was a home that Mother Teresa developed right next to a Hindu temple. And people came out and protested that you had this care center for the sick and dying right next to a holy shrine, and that was inappropriate because these people were dirty. And the police came, and the police commissioner went in, and he said, "I'll take care of this." And he went in, and then Mother came in, and she met with this police commissioner. And he was gone for about a half hour, and the crowd was starting to grow unruly. And when he came out, he said, "I'm going to throw them out of here." And everybody cheered. And he said, "As soon as your mother and your sister and your brother replace the sisters and assist these people, I will throw them out." And everybody put their heads down and walked away. And I remember my first time serving in the Kalighat in that Center for the Dying, and I was treating a young man who was very ill. He was just skin and bones, and I was feeding him, and then I'd lift him up and bring him to the facilities, and then the missionary brothers would bathe him, and I'd bring him back and feed him. And when I came back at one point, he was not moving. And I went to the sister and I said, "Sister, I've got a problem. I think he's not moving." And, she looked at me and she said, "Well, you're so lucky." And I said, "I don't feel that lucky, sister." And she said, "You were with him when he went to God. Your face was the last thing he saw on earth. And it was someone who was caring for him, who was nurturing him, and who really loved him." And so it was that mystique that for me, will always be in my heart, that even in those most difficult circumstances, and even where the church is a minority, it's still serving that mission of love and compassion to people. And so Calcutta became that place for me. And the reason why I said my wife would kill me, I ended up meeting my wife in Calcutta, and we got married. So Calcutta is now my second home. And so whenever we go back to visit family, I also visit family at the Missionaries of Charity Mother House there as well.
Is that right? What a stupendous story. That is so beautiful. Beautiful. And to work with a saint, my God, what a privilege, right?
It was incredible. When at one point I had a couple of colleagues from our headquarters come and visit me, and they were saying, "Do you think there's any chance that, we can visit Mother Teresa or see her? Is she in town?" And right as they started talking, all of a sudden my phone rang, and I picked it up, and the way I responded to Mother was always, "Yes, Mother, yes, Mother, yes, Mother, yes, Mother." And they were kind of, doing a little dance in front of me going, is that Mother Teresa and all? And she was asking if I would get some trucks of food because the sisters in Bangladesh, needed food. And I said, yes, Mother, yes, Mother, yes, Mother. I could get the trucks, but I can't get them out of India because this is donated to India, and you'd have to get permission from the government to do that. And, Mother didn't ever take no for an answer. She said, well, can you have the trucks here by 2 p.m.? And I said, I can get that done. And she said, meet me at 2. So I rushed down, get all these trucks loaded up. We bring them over, and I go over to meet Mother Teresa at 2 p.m. And she's got 6 sisters with her. And she said, are we ready to go? And I said, we need those papers. And she says, sister, and another sister comes over, and she hands me the papers that are approving getting this across the border. India was known as the place that perfected bureaucracy. They say the British invented it, but India perfected it. And I thought it would take weeks to get those papers. Somehow, another miracle of Mother Teresa was she could, grease those skids. But then I asked her what the sisters were doing here. I said, we've got the truck drivers. And she said, I'd like the sisters to be in the first 6 trucks. And I said, okay, Mother, and we sent the trucks on. And then the truckers radioed back that when they got to the border, because of the flooding that had occurred, the trucks were backed up, and there was 1,000 trucks at the border, if you can imagine, between Bangladesh and India there. And as they got up in the back of that line, the first truck driver looked, started to pull over to the side, and the sister shook her finger and said, no, go around them. And he said, I can't go around them. And she said, just please go. And he did, and they started going around. And as they went down, everyone was looking at these trucks going by them and cutting in line. And finally, some of the truckers ended up stopping, and they started pulling out the truck driver out of the truck. And as he was being pulled out, he just pointed over at the sister in the front of the truck, and everyone let them go to the front of the line, and they all went into Bangladesh and served the sisters there with, another miracle, I'll tell you. It was incredible. So working with a saint is, one of the most fun things you can do, because that joy that they bring to the work that they do.
You know what, Sean? Saints can do what the rest of us mere mortals cannot do, right? You realize that. And exactly. What a remarkable thing. But now, Sean, listen, we have a few minutes before our break. So the Holy Father is in Iraq, as you mentioned. And as we're taping this, he arrived earlier this morning. And it is certainly a perilous journey personally for him. But nonetheless, it is a sign, it's a trip that's given tremendous hope to a country that has just seen so much war and destruction. Just speak very briefly to CRS's presence in the Middle East and how it is of help to the countries in the Middle East.
So CRS maintained a presence, and the Holy Father's in Iraq, and in the Middle East, we've maintained a presence there during all of these crises. And our colleagues on the ground have worked closely with the church in Baghdad and in Erbil, where the Holy Father will go. I know when I went to visit them, there was many different checkpoints that we had to go through. We met with the nuncio. There was some real horrible massacres in churches there. The Islamic State had taken over in areas. And as we were traveling in one of the areas, I said, why are we going this way as opposed to the straighter road? And I was told that 25 kilometers in that direction was ISIS. And if we went in that direction, we may, hit with ISIS. And we just saw the Yazidi community and the others. And the Catholic Church, with support from CRS, was doing the best that it could respond. And so seeing the Holy Father there, having his presence there is really not only an example of solidarity, but an example of hope. And I think that's what our presence provides in many areas, is that hope that people are not forgotten and that the U.S. Catholic Church is there on its mission, and we can get word out, and that people in the United States will pray for you. They'll give alms for you, and they will advocate for you. And so it really helps people around the world gain their voice and become stronger.
Excellency and Sean, let me just jump in here quickly for a break. You are listening to Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network, and Bishop Caggiano today is speaking with Sean Callahan, the President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. We'll be back after this break. Catholic radio works, and now we have it here in Connecticut and New York. It's been seen around the country that there's no better tool for evangelization. Where there's Catholic radio, the folks who listen deepen their faith, families are strengthened, parishes and communities flourish. So, let people know you're listening to Veritas. Tell your friends to tune in, and let's make an impact here for Jesus and His Church. This is Steve Lee for Veritas Catholic Network. Welcome back to Let Me Be Frank with Bishop Frank Caggiano. We're picking up on a conversation between Bishop Caggiano and Sean Callahan, the President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. Sean, you just started to tell an incredible story when we were on break, and you should definitely start off with that for this segment.
Thanks, Steve. I was just mentioning to the bishop that it's one of the blessings that we have at CRS and working for the global church to actually meet saints. And I had the opportunity with Mother Teresa, but then I got a call one day when I was working in our headquarters before going out to my new assignment in India, and I was asked to join the Asian Bishop Synod. So I went out there, participated in the synod, and then at one point later one evening, the cardinal in charge of the synod, Cardinal Schotte, said, how would you like to have dinner with the Holy Father, John Paul II? And I said, I'd love to have dinner with the Holy Father. And I said, is this for real? And he said, yeah, be at the bronze door at 6. And so I went to the bronze door. We were escorted up to his apartment, and there were 6 of us there. Each of us got a moment with the Holy Father outside of his chapel to just talk. And then we got to have dinner with him, and it was amazing, his understanding of world events. And because this was the Asian Synod, we were focusing mainly on Asia. And he had the voices of the local communities from Asia, a few other priests that were there. And then he asked me as an American what we could do to assist the people of Asia and what we were doing as a ministry of the U.S. Catholic Church. And so that was, an incredible experience. And then when Mother Teresa was being canonized, I happened to be with Sister Nirmala, her replacement as the Mother Superior, in a church in Delhi, and the Holy Father came right over to Sister Nirmala, and I was kind of sheltering her from this crowd that was, pushing on in, and the Holy Father greeted us again. And so I really feel that our team on the ground, is so courageous in reaching out to people in their time of need and in very difficult situations. And these saints of the church are the ones that provide us that inspiration and the protection that we have as we go out there. And so, I really feel like we've been blessed by those opportunities.
Yeah, and solidarity, if I may say, as Mother Teresa stood shoulder to shoulder with the exact same work, right? Sean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with the Rice Bowl initiative, but would you explain its purpose and give some people some of the background why it's so important to CRS?
Certainly, the Rice Bowl is one of our kind of iconic things here at CRS, and we're so proud of it. The CRS Rice Bowl is a way that we can pray, give alms, and provide a connection and support to people around the world. And we usually focus on different areas of the world. This year, we're focusing on Madagascar and El Salvador and Mali. And it's a learning program which brings families together so that families can share the different information and ideas and understand that our church is just not the church around the corner. It's just not our neighborhood church. It's not just the church in our state or in the U.S., but we're part of a global community, and we have a responsibility for that community around the world. And I think at this time where we've seen COVID and understand that what happens in one part of the world affects us in our own world, I think people are beginning to realize that a little bit more. And the idea behind the Rice Bowl, and I didn't really realize it myself until I arrived in Calcutta and was at Christ the King Church in Calcutta. And when I went to my mass there during Lent, I noticed all these green bowls that were up front at the altar. And what they did in Calcutta was, in the tradition there, was you feed your family, but you scoop out a handful of rice for your neighbors or people that don't have enough food to eat. And so it's that giving to others of what you have, that sacrificial gift of part of what would sustain you, that you give to other people, that they actually termed it makes your family stronger and bonds your family. And so we at CRS try to emulate that by sending our paper rice bowls around the country, but it's a way to unite families around the cause of giving to others and bringing families together and strengthening their spirituality, their faith in the Catholic Church, but also our social fabric that we are one human family around the world. And so I appreciate you raising that, because at Lent it's been difficult for us to always get that word out, as many churches are not at full capacity now. But I think it's important that the Catholic community here know that the efforts that they make in supporting that not only help people overseas through CRS, but 25% of the receipts of that help in our local communities as well, and it allows the diocese to reach out to those in need in our own communities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if I am a parishioner who, for whatever reason, cannot go to Mass, where would I get information for the Rice Bowl? Would I go on the CRS website?
You can definitely go on, the CRS website, which is www.crs.org, or there's a specific one for the Rice Bowl, which is crsricebowl.org. And if you want to see some of the virtual events that we're doing at crsricebowl.org/virtual events, people can actually participate in virtual events with others and see how different people in the United States are celebrating, and they can see how their donations are working to strengthen the people overseas who are in need.
So now, my friends, you raised the $1 million word, virtual. Okay, we're in this crazy pandemic time, right? And quite frankly, a time of tremendous challenge, tremendous suffering. Most of your work has been traveling to different parts of the world, right? And much of that ground to a halt in the last year. And I know managing 7,000 people in 100 plus countries in a time of pandemic, I mean, in normal times, it's a challenge. In pandemic times, it's this huge challenge. So talk to us programmatically, personally, this pandemic. How have you managed CRS? What has changed? And on a personal level, what lessons have you learned in this last year or so vis-a-vis the work of CRS? Are there any things that we have done that perhaps are going to be a permanent structure of CRS going forward? Certainly the world's changed. So how have you managed, which I know you've done a phenomenal job, but explain to our listeners, how have you done this in a pandemic situation?
It's a great question, Bishop, and I think a lot of it we have to give credit to the Holy Spirit, because I think all of us, when we left our offices on March 13th last year, I thought it was just going to be for a week or so, and I'd be back in that office and I'd be back traveling, because I normally would travel overseas for 2 weeks every month, and since the pandemic, I haven't been overseas at all. But the one thing I want to make sure that your listeners understand is, although we've had new arrangements and we've had to pivot, the incredible thing is that the church did not close during this pandemic. And then the response of the church to the needs of the people might have even grown during this pandemic. And we're seeing around the world that actually the need is increasing. And so what we did at CRS was we jumped onto the virtual nature and made sure that we had daily check-ins and actual daily meetings at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then with our overseas teams, sometimes even earlier that, so that we could keep everyone connected. We would then make sure that everything we did respected the most important protocols to keep all of our colleagues safe. And then in many countries around the world, although in the United States we were able to be more virtual, and so trying to connect with our supporters, with parishioners and others, we did a lot of new innovative virtual events. Overseas, we tried to use radios and other mechanisms, but many of the people with whom we worked couldn't go virtual. And so our staff had to go out there with the proper protocols, but changing our procedures in some ways. So instead of schools that might have a daily meal, but schools were closed, we would do monthly deliveries, and we would keep people separate so that we'd have circles on the ground and they'd walk from one circle to the next. Mm-hmm. We kept people masked and people followed those traditions. So our teams on the ground continued working because many of them said, it's more likely that the communities we're going to be working with will die of hunger than they will die of COVID. Right. And so we need to make sure that we are there. And so those efforts continued in countries where there was violence. Our team, maintained that solidarity that was there. And we have had some colleagues who have traveled from the United States, but when they do travel, they must hunker down for a quarantine period of time when they arrive in the countries so that they make sure that they're not carrying everything and would keep people safe. And in addition to that, we're advocating for treatments, therapeutics, and vaccines to be equitably accessed around the world, and the Holy Father has called for that. And we're working to prepare the local church and even ministries of health and local governments. Once these vaccines are available, we're working to assist them in how to distribute them, because we've had some experience with supply chains for distributing mosquito nets or food deliveries or other things like that. And our community health network is continuing to reach out to women and children, because as you might imagine, during this time, many people have not gone for their normal health checkups. And so we're having more and more children not having their measles vaccinations or taking their polio medication, or women not having pre and postnatal care. And so we're afraid that this coming year and the next, we may see some spikes in other infirmities given the pandemic. And so we're trying to reach out as much as we can. So although I'm operating from my basement in my house and go to the office on occasion when I need to meet with people, I have my general counsel come into my driveway and we sign off on all the important documents in the back of his little Subaru car.
Of course.
Father Robert, my Franciscan colleague who lives just a couple miles away, he comes over and we discuss our things and sign it, both masked up in my driveway. So we're doing innovative things, but I think the message to take away is the church didn't close. It's still as vibrant as ever out there, and we're just happy that we can be part of that effort.
You used a very interesting phrase before when we began our conversation, shadow pandemics, and the unintended but real consequences, particularly in the developing world, of having such a cataclysmic event occur, such as COVID-19. And you mentioned food insecurity, but there are others, right? And you just alluded to another, the fact that, as is true in the United States, it is also true in other parts of the world with perhaps greater consequence, that just normal inoculations or the ability to make sure that people attend to their health needs, that gets deferred. But what other unintended consequences from CRS's point of view? What other shadows from the pandemic, Sean, do you see now as we're entering really at the beginning of year 2 of this pandemic?
Bishop, it's a great question. And there's probably, in addition to those health consequences and the consequences of hunger, we see a couple other things that are happening. One is, as has happened in the United States, schools have not been able to remain open. And unfortunately, many homes cannot be virtual. And so we have lost, a year of education in many of the countries in which we've been in. But even more devastating than that is that we're seeing the likelihood that young girls will likely not go back to school after they've been taken out. Some of them have had to work in the home and the family, and so they have been seen as an important worker in the family, and so it's been reducing girls' education. So we're particularly concerned about that and trying to emphasize through some of our advocacy mechanisms, the local church and radio stations, the importance of girls getting education. The other thing that we've seen is, unfortunately, with people hunkered down at home and the pressures of the pandemic and these shadow pandemics, that there's unfortunately been an increase in domestic violence in many places. And we've seen, I had a couple really heartbreaking stories from some of our staff in the countries that they live in on young children being subject to violence in the home or in the community because of people feeling the pressure from this. And so we're trying to see, where we can assist in that realm. And then thirdly, some countries have taken the opportunity to be less democratic and less open to either religious organizations or civil society in general. And they put in some restrictions that may be longer lasting than we hope. So we're hoping that we can raise visibility that these might have been good things to prevent the COVID-19 pandemic and, the consequences of Ebola and things at other times. But we need to go back to some of the democratic institutions, the freedom of religion, the freedom of movement, the freedom of speech that people had, so that this pandemic is not used as an excuse to stifle people's independence.
Yeah, which would be a terrible, long-lasting consequence to this pandemic if that were the case, right?
It certainly would.
Again, our listeners may or may not know this. I would encourage them to go on the website of CRS and really take a deep dive into the long-term strategic plan that was put together for CRS. And why don't you speak to that Vision 2030 initiative that CRS has put forward as the long-term vision, at least long-term for the next decade or so?
Yes, CRS, instead of like many organizations, as this technology period came in, a lot of organizations decided they were going to go to a 1 to 3 year strategy because things were changing so fast. And at CRS, we decided we were going to go actually the opposite direction, and we developed a 12-year strategy. So our strategy goes to 2030. And it had four main goals and main approaches, that we were taking. One of them was to catalyze humanitarian and development outcomes to scale. And so what that means is we had been helping people around the world, but we wanted to use what we call an influence agenda to assist more and more people. And so what we're doing is we're investing in the local partners that we have on the ground and allowing their story to be told, and then influencing others. And what I mean by that is if we do an agricultural program in a community and the farmers in this water catchment area do some terracing and do some water conservation activities, their neighbors on the hills on the other side of the valley start looking over and saying, wow, why is it green over there and we, can't produce any fruit? And so what we're doing is assisting people in spreading that word and influencing others. And then we're also doing that so that we can influence governments, and that governments will invest more in their people because they'll see that it makes sense. So we're often working now within those local communities with local mayors who are dependent on the local farmers in many of these cases for their votes. And then the group of mayors goes up to the Capitol and starts telling the government where to go. And so we are actually having a change at a much larger scale than we have ever had before. And in one of the most important areas that we're focusing on is livelihoods. And so it's primarily agriculture, but there's also small businesses and small business loans that we do in this strategy to help people move forward. In addition to the livelihoods, as many people know, people in the world have been displaced at record numbers, and there's over 80 million people that are not in their homes due to war, due to economic conditions, due to drought. And so the Catholic Church has provided assistance. And the first thing the church we try to do, for instance, in these livelihoods and employment generating programs, is allow people not to have to migrate. The church would like to have the people be able to stay where they are, to earn a good income, to be able to put their kids in school, and let them have health care where they are. If that is not possible because there's a violent situation or there's some type of exploitation there, then the church assists people in moving to different areas. And so what we have been doing, and particularly as the result of large disasters that have occurred, but also some violence in various countries, we're helping people build homes and communities. And instead of the old shelters that we would put up for a short period of time, we're finding that many people who are displaced for 15, 17, 21 years. And so building that homes and communities helps then protect the family, protect the community in general, and have a normalcy so that the youth and the young people can grow up in an area that's somewhat more normal than it would be, if they were just in a camp. And so the third key area besides livelihoods in this homes and communities is reaching out and empowering youth so that they can thrive. Mm-hmm. And the other way we've done that with youth is allowing them to participate in the agricultural works or even the COVID response, and having them go out there and go door to door and explain to people where that goes. It gives them a sense of where they are. And then our two other goal areas is the family, making sure there's full health and development in safe and nurturing families, and then peaceful societies. So we try to work with the church wherever we are on strengthening that social fabric of the family, and bringing communities together. So right. Those are the key areas in which we work.
The very fact that you had mentioned that one of the strategic goals is empowering youth resonates deeply in me. You and I have had these conversations offline, Sean, and we're of like mind that everything you have described is like a hidden jewel in the American Catholic Church that most people, most Catholics, even observant Catholics, do not really understand. Please God, now after this podcast, they will understand better the phenomenal work that's done and what a difference it is making, all in the name of the Lord. It's not just to do good for good's sake. It's do because it's a mission of the gospel. And therefore, we're of agreement, I think, that this could be the door to engage our young adults in this country who may be uncomfortable, even to the point of disaffected from the church because of what they know of it. When they learn about CRS and the good that's being done and the ways they could be of help, it engages them. It brings them into a relationship with the church that they would never have imagined before, right? And that's the entree to a dialogue with them, accompanying them to ever greater involvement in the church. So I think, and I've been with CRS now just about a year and a half, whatever, a little bit less than a year and a half. And I appreciate your presence here because the more word we can get out about CRS, the more there is the possibility to not just ask help from all Catholics, but particularly young adults to get them involved in the work of CRS because it will transform their lives. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree. I think it's crucially important. One, they can be part of the gospel in action and they can see themselves making a difference. The other thing that I think they would find very interesting is, for instance, on the continent of Africa, 70% of the population is below age 25. In other places where we work, 60% of the population is below age 25. So it is really their sisters and brothers around the world, their fellow colleagues around the world who are going to be the leaders of those countries and who we need to make sure that we're assisting right now so that they have the opportunities to make a difference. And I think those people would really love to feel that solidarity of the youth from the United States with them on this journey. And I think the U.S. Youth could also learn a lot from these people on the perseverance and fortitude that they've had on overcoming a lot of obstacles, where they are, but also just the joy with which they do it and their sense of solidarity around the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What a tremendous point. Tremendous. This has been a great conversation, Sean. I am so grateful that you made the time to. I know you're a very busy man, but to make the time to join the podcast it gives a glimpse of the wonderful time I have working with you privately. Now everyone has had a glimpse of what CRS is really all about. It's just been extremely, extremely fruitful, right?
Well,
Thank you for
thank you,
taking
Bishop.
the time to be here, Sean.
Thank you, and I would just we say at CRS it's a team effort, and although we are able to be the hands and the feet on the ground, it really is the American Catholic Church, the bishops, the Catholic community here who provide us the support and inspiration to make it happen. So the more we can all work together for this, the stronger the church will be here in the United States, and the stronger the unity will be around the world. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I'll see you Tuesday for our meeting.
Exactly.
we need to take one quick break right now, Sean and Your Excellency. But this is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. Bishop Caggiano has been speaking with Sean Callahan, the President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. We will be right back.
Why do we need Catholic radio? Because not everybody's sitting in front of a computer or watching their television set at home. How about when driving to work? How about while at work at your desk? Catholic radio's there for you. I may be a Catholic priest, but I'm still a student of the faith. And Catholic radio helps supply good material, whether it be a question and answer format show, whether it be a show itself on doctrine or theology. I myself, as a priest, am always learning.
All right, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank with Bishop Frank Caggiano. His Excellency has been speaking today with Sean Callahan, the President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. We've come to the part of the show where we've got a listener question for the Bishop. Bishop, this week's question, it was emailed in from Sylvia from Newtown. She said, "It says in Revelation 21:4, He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death or mourning, wailing or pain, for the old order has passed away." Mm-hmm. My question is, if our loved ones are not in heaven with us, how can we not mourn them and all the others who are in hell?
Now, that is an excellent question, for which I think there is only, from our perspective, from our earthly perspective, our ability to perhaps to speculate, because it is very hard for us to imagine a life that is perfectly in love with He who is love, which is what heaven is. And it seems from our perspective that if we do not have loved ones with us in heaven, that we would mourn their absence when we are in heaven. But the truth of the matter is, when we are in heaven, we are enveloped, enwrapped, enthralled with love in its purity, in its completeness. And therefore, may seem contradictory from our perspective. When you have the prize, then that is what your focus is. In heaven, our focus is on the beatific vision, on God, not on each other. We are aware of each other, but we are not focusing on each other. It's almost as if we are all looking in the same direction, and that direction envelops our life. So I honestly do not know the answer to that question from our perspective as to will we be aware of their absence, but my hunch is we will not, because our focus will be totally and completely on the Lord and His loving presence there. But it's a great question. Well, when we get there, the goal is to get to heaven and find out. That's the goal.
God willing.
Right?
So if you're listening and you have a question for Bishop Frank Caggiano, send them in. You can email questions@veritascatholic.com, or you can post them on social media. Bishop Frank Caggiano is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and so is Veritas Catholic Network. Sean Callahan, President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. You guys are doing phenomenal work. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate joining you and the bishop, and I just hope the listeners all continue to support the church's efforts around the world, and they can jump in and do that during Lent with the CRS Rice Bowl. So thank you very much.
And you guys are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and you would point listeners to www.crs.org. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Steve.
Yep. Yeah. Excellency, would you please give us your blessing?
Yes, absolutely. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he shine his face upon you and be merciful to you. May the Lord in his great kindness grant you his peace. And we ask you the Lord's blessings upon our listeners, ourselves, and all of the wonderful people who work at CRS in service of their sisters and brothers throughout the world. We ask this in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 I'll see you next week, Steve.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Sean,
Thank you.
God bless.
Take care. Thank you.